Hari, over to you.
Hello, everyone. We do talk about outsourcing and all that kind of stuff. Scott has found a way how you can never outsource things. Only he knows how things work here. So your job is always secure. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why businesses should care about economic inequality. That's what I have titled my presentation as. As a researcher, I've been interested in issues that arise in the organization or which have basis in the organizations but have larger implications on the society. Some of you may have seen my earlier research on product safety crisis and China. Recently, I have started taking interest in global financial crisis. A couple of my colleagues and we have written a few research articles. We examined the responses of business leaders, CEOs and stakeholders to the global financial crisis. In our examination, what we found was that despite the enormity of the crisis, there were hardly any calls for change. The CEOs and stakeholders were mostly saying, things are fine, we'll maintain status quo. They were not making any changes to the systems or organizational practices. So that was one thing that was surprising, because it was one of the biggest things that has happened in our lifetimes, and people are not talking about any changes. And second thing that we noted was that the entire discourse is dominated by those whom we can call as elites. The common man perspective was completely absent. What we see is that comments made by academics, regulators, and business leaders and all those, but they never ask anything about consumers, okay, like people who have lost jobs. So that is one thing that was also very noteworthy. What we see as a result of the global financial crisis is that the economic inequality has increased, but there has been relatively a lot of calm in North America. In contrast, in Europe, we have seen riots and a lot of uproar. So we were always wondering, for about 2 years, we were wondering, why is that nobody talking about it? Why is there such relative calm in North America? And then came Occupy Wall Street and then turned into Occupy everything. You have seen the number of countries where it has spread to. So then we started looking at what are the business implications of it. So one thing that surprised us again was that although businesses have some role to play in it, if not the central role, business community or business academics have been largely unresponsive. They were not saying much. So we thought, okay, let's talk about it. So I'm not giving any figures because the figures keep changing depending on who is putting them out and all. But by now, one thing has been clearly mentioned, clearly highlighted, clearly drove home by Occupy movement is the income and wealth distribution. As you can see, those who are at the top 1% make a lot of dollars, and then those who are at the next 19% make roughly as much, and then those who are at the bottom, like that's about 80% of us, they make very little. So if you look at this, this looks fine, right? Does it look fine? Does it look stable? It's a pyramid, so it must be stable, right? So that's why what I thought was, let's visualize it differently. It is not, when something is like this, it is not a pyramid anymore. It's an inverted pyramid, right? I really want us to take a moment to internalize this. It's not a pyramid anymore. It's not like this. It is an inverted pyramid. So what happens when a pyramid is inverted? Is it stable? It's not going to be stable, right? So how can you make it stable? Spin it. If you spin it, what happens? Stable for a short period of time, and you can tilt it. You can turn it completely, but there's going to be a lot of unrest, right? So what normally happens, right, is that when the pyramid is inverted, there are attempts to stabilize it, right? So the engineer in me tells that you can have some structures, supporting structures that would keep it in place. These supporting structures are called guard labor by economist Samuel Bowles. What he says is that to keep the system in place, we create a lot of roles which could be prisons, could be policing and monitoring roles, security roles, all these roles which do not add anything productive but just maintain the system in place. Now what happens if you are an organization in that society? What happens? Just think about it. You're next to the pyramid, which is not really stable, right? What you do is you try to cover yourself. You try to protect yourself by fortifying your core. So that is one that you can do. The other thing that you can do is that you can contribute to the stability of the inverted pyramid through various means. What are those? You can do that through taxes. So we have seen earlier that it is the guard labor which provides the largest supporting structures. So the other way is that the organizations can help this system to be in place by paying taxes and through lobbying so that regulations and policies keep the system in place as it is. This is the next dilemma, right? You can do that. But what if the organization itself is unequal? So you have a much larger problem. So where you have the top management or the top 10% of the workforce taking a large amount of the income. So what happens then? You have not only supporting structures that you have to give to the society, and you have to protect your organization by fortifying it, but also you must have your own support structures. But finally, organizations are within the society. So no matter how much support you would give, no matter how many supporting structures you create for the society, no matter how much you do, if the entire system is not stable, you are not going to be stable. Sometime or the other, you are going to run into problems. So what are those problems? These are the problems that arise because of human development suffering due to inequality. Richard Wilkinson has talked about or has shown through a number of studies how countries that are highly unequal have low human development. That is reflected in a number of things: life expectancy, teenage pregnancies, violence, crime rates, all that. But there are two things that I would like to take up for discussion. One is that those societies, the people in those societies tend to have lower skills, particularly math and literacy scores. And second is that those are the people who are also likely to have less trust in the system, less trust. They are likely to be less trusting of others. And then also the opportunities for social mobility are not very high. He not only showed this between countries, but also between states within a country. So the states where the inequality is high, human development is low. The states where inequality is low, human development is high. So what comes up with this is that level of inequality or average does not matter. What matters is the spread, how much inequality is there. So if you take this forward, the people who are low on human development, they enter organizations, right? We ultimately get our employees from the society. So they enter organizations. So what happens? We have high human resource costs as a result of low human development. First of all, you have few skilled personnel, so you are competing for those skilled people, so you pay more. So that is one. Second is that if you don't get them, you may have to hire people with low skills. And when you hire people with low skills, then you would invest in training and development. So that is one cost. The second is similar to the guard labor, where you're trying to keep things in place. There will be high supervision costs when there is high inequality. So because these people don't trust, you cannot really form teams. So you cannot form a lot of teams, so you have more supervisors. And also there is going to be low mobility, like there are not many opportunities for you to move up. So these employees are more likely to have low motivation and be very vengeful. And also as a result of low motivation, they are likely to be low on productivity. And finally, you are also likely to have lower revenues, overall, lower revenues, because you are going to have you're overall likely to have lower revenues because there is not much movement of people up. People are not moving up on the pyramid. So because of the inequality, you have a large population which is just making do. So the consumption type differs. So the middle class shrinks. As a result, your revenues will be lower. So how can you fix this? So there are two things to do. One is the internal inequality, that is organizational inequality, the smaller pyramid that we see. So one is that you have to make sure that the pay is equitably distributed. Pay equity is high in organizations. One example that comes to mind is the Costco, where the CEO's pay is less than 10 times that of the average worker pay. Now, in an industry like in a retail industry where the big box retailers have there have been so many stories about employee abuse, low wage, and all that kind of stuff. Costco is an industry leader. It does generate industry leading returns. And more importantly, one measure of the sabotage is what they call as shrinkage in the retail industry. Shrinkage is a euphemism for the theft by the employees. Costco's theft by the employees or shrinkage is 10% of the industry average. So you can see benefits coming directly from there. So that is one. And second is that you have to invest more in training and development so that you generate opportunities for employees to move up and also be able to trust others. So the second thing that we need to do is to manage the external inequality, that is the inequality in the society. So how can you do? You can create a division that would track the trends in inequity in the society and then make some kind of recommendations or create programs to manage that. This is not something that has happened so far, but there are examples that we can take, like Pepsi, for example, right? Pepsi has been criticized for selling sugar drinks to people and making them obese and unhealthy. So what they did was they hired people who worked earlier for World Health Organization, Mayo Clinic, and a lot of scientists they've hired, and created a division whose mandate is to develop products that are healthier. So one product that they have developed is Trop 50. We all know the Tropicana orange juice, right? Trop 50 is something that has half the calories of the regular orange juice, Tropicana. Now this brand has now reached to be a $100 million brand. So it is that you can create new products and services and make money. And another thing that you can do is to provide access to to communities and groups in the society through better education or through skill development. One example that comes to mind is Tata Group in India. A lot of companies in India, in fact, do focus on community development. The reason why I'm giving an Indian example is that countries like India have seen high levels of inequality. Inequality is something that we are talking about now. Of course, it has been there in this part of the world before, but it is becoming more and more prominent now. But in countries like India, the inequality has always been high. So how did companies manage that? If you look at Tata, one of the most successful companies, Tata Group they do everything from tea to hotels, like they do software, they are into everything. But they also do a lot of community development through their trust. They put a lot of their profits back into the society in terms of education. They have set up educational institutions, they have set up hospitals, and they have set up research institutes. So in general, focusing on community development and infrastructure development for the places where they operate. So that is another thing that you can do. So to conclude, we have always thought that economic inequality is good for business because it increases aspiration and growth. So when there is some amount of inequality, it does increase aspiration in people. So you want to move up, right? So you create new products and services, so it is good for businesses. But businesses, if they have a narrow focus on the top management or only shareholders or short-term profits, then they can increase economic inequality, as we've seen before. So the top two loops are kind of visible. Like you can see like very clearly. We have all talked about it. But what we see is that economic inequality can actually hurt businesses because of guard labor that we talked about and also low human development. To counter that, what you need to do is to create another loop that goes back from business to the economic inequality, which should try to decrease economic inequality through internal equity, skill development, and opportunity generation. So what we need is a broader systems thinking where you're not only looking at the short term or the direct loops, but also and visible loops, but also the invisible loops and a longer term orientation. So with that, I conclude.
Thank you very much, Hari.
I also have a thank you, sir. Thank you.
As I was listening to Hari talk about lower skills, less trust in the system, a Midas Muffler commercial I remember watching back in the 80s came to mind. You can pay me now or you can pay me later. You know, kind of interesting to reflect the nature of the system. Let's see if there's a question or two for Hari before we move on to our next commentator. Any questions for Hari? Please.
You're at the very end of the presentation, you're saying that we can decrease the economic inequality by shareholding, different, more so kind of, I don't know, kind of positive things. What about, what do you think about the states is thinking about taxing the higher incomes? What do you think of that?
On those things, I would probably, I think our economists are better equipped to handle that. My focus is looking at what businesses can do. Okay, public policy implications are there. Yes, definitely governments can do a lot more. There are a number of economists who talked about how you create equity in the society. So one is that you can definitely do that through taxation. Yes, but I'm not an expert to comment on that. Yes.
There's a question right behind you.
So some of your example of what businesses can do to counteract the costs of inequality are based in the Indian experience. You used talk. And the question that occurs to me is that from the experience, a particular experience in history in which there was an export-oriented economy for India, for Tata, and I know Tata does a lot internally, but also does that focus on counteracting costs? Is that possible when you don't have a strong outside market, say the U.S., as the U.S. has served for India? So what, for example, would Canada or the U.S. have as that outside economy that we could be oriented towards if we're going to have a really low wage workforce?
So I think what we're seeing is that firstly, depending on exports is a relatively new thing for India. Okay, so Tata Group and a number of other companies which were there for a long time, which have been there for a long time, their focus was on the domestic market. Exports is a recent one. When I say recent, it's about 20 plus years. So that tells you how old I am. So So it's about 2 decades old phenomena that India is focusing on exports. But the same examples you would find in North America as well. I'm sure, like, some of you would know about the steel cities that we have seen in North America, where the entire city is, based on a particular factory or particular manufacturing sector. So the idea is that these businesses do try to develop those communities, take up the whole community, not simply looking at, we are here, we pay you the wage and you work for us, but trying to develop the community in terms of providing schools, developing schools, or setting up infrastructure and hospitals, things like that. So there are cases like that that we see. There are many examples like that even in this part of the world as well. Yes.
I'm going to, in the interest of time,
Yes.
hold the questions at this point, but we would like to come back to you a little later. Thank you very much, Hadi.